I used to believe that memories faded with time like old photographs tucked away in dusty attic boxes, yellowing, curling at the edges, eventually forgotten. But I've learned that memories don't die. They wait. They burrow deep inside you. And when you return to the place where they were born, they come crawling back. It was early evening when I arrived on the outskirts of Dagger Point, a forgotten town nestled deep in coastal Maine. The air was wet and cold, the kind that sinks into your bones. As I pulled my car to a stop near the town's welcome sign, "Welcome to Dagger Point, population 1742, I noticed the letters were chipped, nearly faded, as if even the town wanted to erase itself. The forest leaned unnaturally close to the road, the trees too tall, too dense, as though they'd been inching toward the asphalt for decades. I hadn't been back here since I was 12 years old. That was the night my father shoved us into the car and drove away without a word. We left in the dark and never returned. He never talked about why, and neither did I. Now he was dead. A heart attack, they said. And the house, the Voss estate, was mine. I hadn't expected that. I hadn't wanted it. The house stood at the end of Briar Lane, as silent and looming as I remembered. A tall Victorian wrapped in flaking gray paint, its gabled roof and broken shutters giving it the appearance of something that should have been condemned. It used to be called the Voss estate, but I would later learn the locals whispered another name behind closed doors: the Burrow. I couldn't recall where I'd heard that name before. Inside, the house smelled of mildew and old paper. Every piece of furniture was draped in a sheet, giving the rooms a ghostly, corpse-like quality. The grandfather clock in the foyer had stopped at exactly 3:16. I didn't know why that detail mattered, but I noted it anyway. I set up my things in the study, where the bookshelves still bowed under the weight of old psychology texts and folklore tomes. My father had been obsessed with fringe theories, unexplained phenomena, dream research. The kinds of things you dismiss as academic fantasy until you read them in your dead father's handwriting. That's where I found his journal. It was hidden behind a worn copy of Freud's The Interpretation of Dreams, bound in cracked leather and warped from humidity. The final entry was dated just 4 days before his death. The hollow ones don't feed on flesh. They feed on forgetting. They live in the in-between. The moments between thoughts, between sleep and waking. And they found me again. I laughed when I read it, but the sound died quickly in the still air. I told myself it was the rambling of a man who'd spent too much time alone, losing his grip on reality. But that night, as I lay in my old bedroom unable to sleep, I began to hear them. The whispers. Faint and fleeting. Not in the room but inside the walls. As if something just beyond the drywall was mouthing my name. And then sometime past 3 in the morning I heard 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Knock. 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 They didn't come from the front door. They came from inside the wall. I shot upright in bed, soaked in sweat. My heart hammered in my chest, a dull thud that echoed in my ears. I couldn't remember what I'd dreamed, but something about it clung to me like static in my bones. A darkness that didn't lift when I opened my eyes. The whispers were gone. But something else had taken their place. A presence. Thick and invisible, pressing against my skin. Like I wasn't the only one awake in the room. That's when I saw the mirror. The antique mirror had been covered with a black cloth when I arrived. I was sure of it. I hadn't removed it. But now the cloth was gone. The mirror stood tall and uncovered, its bronze frame mottled with black age spots. My reflection looked pale and drawn, but that wasn't what made me freeze. There was someone else in the mirror. A man. He stood behind me, thin, pale, wearing a wrinkled suit that looked like it had been buried and dug up again. He had no eyes. Just smooth skin stretched across the sockets like wax. I turned around instantly, but the room was empty. I whipped my head back toward the mirror and he was closer. Standing right behind me now. Still no mouth. No movement. Watching. His head tilted slightly like he was trying to understand me. And then he smiled. Even without a mouth I could feel it. That grin, slow and stretching, somehow visible across the void. I ran. I bolted from the bedroom and shut myself in the study. I locked the door behind me, trying to tell myself it was a dream. A hallucination brought on by stress and lack of sleep. But then I noticed something new in my father's journal. Something I hadn't seen the night before. A symbol drawn over and over again in frantic, looping graphite. A ring of thorns encircling an open eye. Beneath it, smeared in shaky ink, were the words. The burrow sees you. The power flickered. My phone still wouldn't charge and I couldn't get a signal. Desperate for any sound besides the pounding of my own heart, I tried the old radio on the shelf. It buzzed with static, but something moved beneath the noise. A voice. Distant and crackling like it was trying to claw its way through the airwaves. "You shouldn't be here, Elena," it said. "The more you remember, the deeper they dig." Morning didn't feel like a reprieve. If anything, the gray light outside only sharpened the town's decay. I drove into Dagger Point Center and found it practically dead. The gas station was boarded up. The school was abandoned. Even the church had chains across its doors. One place remained open, a diner with faded signage that read Gracie's. Inside were a handful of townspeople, none of whom I recognized. Their eyes stuck to me the moment I stepped through the door. They stared too long. Too quietly. Only one man spoke. He wore a sheriff's badge that looked like it had survived 2 decades without polish. "You're Voss's girl," he said. I replied. He passed. "I know," he said, stirring his coffee. "We all know." There was a long pause. "Your father shouldn't have come back. And neither should you." I asked what he meant, but he didn't answer directly. Just kept his eyes on the fog beyond the window, murmuring about cracks. Cracks in memory. In the walls. In the soul. "They feed through the cracks," he said. "Who?" I asked. "The hollow ones," he muttered. He dug too deep. He tried to name them. That was his mistake. A crash in the kitchen broke the moment. A waitress had dropped a plate and the sound made everyone flinch. For a moment, every face turned to me with something worse than suspicion. Recognition. I returned to the house before sunset. The mirror in the bedroom was covered again. But I hadn't touched it. And there were footprints on the wooden floor. Wet. Muddy. Leading from the mirror to the foot of my bed. No prints going out. Only in. I curled up in the study, hugging my knees, heart thudding against my ribs like it wanted to escape me. I wanted to leave. I really truly did. But then I realized something that made my blood run cold. I couldn't remember how I got here. Not the drive. Not the highway. Not even the decision to come. All I could remember was the whisper I thought I'd imagined. "Come home." The next morning brought a brittle kind of silence, the kind that didn't feel earned by sleep. I had drifted off only briefly in the study chair, and my neck ached with the stiffness of bad dreams. I wasn't sure what time it was. The grandfather clock had stopped again. Same time. 3:16. There was something about that number. It echoed in my head like a warning. Like a countdown that never reached 0. I wandered the house in a daze, retracing the footprints I had seen the night before. But they were gone now. No wet marks, no mud. Just the faded, dusty floorboards beneath my feet. I might have doubted myself, called it stress or a waking dream if not for one thing. There were scratches on the mirror now. Long, thin marks etched into the glass from the inside. 5 of them. Like fingers dragging upward in desperation. I turned away from it, heart thudding, and tried to focus on something real. Tangible. I returned to the study and picked up my father's journal. I needed to make sense of it, of him, of why he came back here after all those years, alone and terrified. In the margins of one page, written in a smaller, more frantic hand, I found a passage that made me stop breathing. "There's a hatch beneath the cellar. Old boards hide it. It was sealed by the first caretakers in 1879. They heard them down there, scratching, whispering. Said the voices weren't just inside the walls but inside the head. That's when the forgetting began." I read it twice. 3 times. Each time the words hit differently. Not because they didn't make sense, but because something inside me remembered them. I didn't even know there was a cellar. I found the entrance in the kitchen, beneath a moldy old rug and a loose board that creaked as if warning me not to proceed. The handle was rusted. The hinges screamed in protest as I lifted the trapdoor, revealing a steep flight of wooden steps descending into darkness. A smell wafted up that turned my stomach. Rotten earth. Something that hadn't seen light in decades. I descended slowly, flashlight in hand, 1 step at a time. The cellar was small and lined with crumbling stone. But tucked behind a stack of crates was something else. Another door. Shorter than average, almost child-sized, and built into the stone. It had no knob. Just iron rings and a wax seal across the center, long broken. As I stared at it, my flashlight flickered. And I heard it again. The whisper. No, not just one. Many. Layered. Murmuring in a language I didn't know but understood all the same. She's opening it. Too soon. The burrow breathes. Then the whisper changed. Said my name. Elena. I backed away, heart punching at my ribs, and the flashlight died entirely. For 1 full minute I stood in absolute darkness, surrounded by the scent of wet earth and the rustling sound of something moving on the other side of that door. Something alive. I stumbled up the stairs, slamming the trapdoor shut behind me. I shoved a chair over it even though I knew that would do nothing. Back in the study, I locked the door and lit every candle I could find. Electricity was useless here. The house didn't just resist light, it devoured it. That night, I dreamt of the hollow-eyed man again. Only this time I wasn't in my bedroom. I was in the cellar, standing in front of the door, and he was behind me, whispering directly into my ear. You opened it. You let them smell you. Now you'll start to forget. I turned in the dream, slowly, like my limbs were underwater, and looked at him. Only it wasn't him anymore. It was me, staring back. Hollow-eyed. Smiling without a mouth. I woke up screaming. The days that followed warped around me like melted wax. Time began to blur. I'd catch glimpses of the clock, but it never moved. My phone remained dead. No messages. No reception. And I couldn't remember simple things, what I'd eaten, what day it was, whether I had even slept. The only thing that remained constant was the scratching beneath the floorboards. Every night. A little louder. A little closer. On the 5th day I found something that shattered me. A photograph tucked inside one of the books in the study. It was old, yellowed at the edges. A group of people standing in front of the house. Maybe from the 1940s. My father was there, a child maybe 10 years old. But so was I. Clear as day. Same face. Same hair. Standing beside him, holding his hand. I dropped the photo and backed away like it had burned me. My legs gave out and I sat on the floor trying to catch my breath. How was that possible? How could I be in a photo that predated my birth by decades? Unless this wasn't the first time I'd come back. Unless I'd always been here. And I'd just forgotten. I didn't leave the house the next day. I couldn't. The photo haunted me like a fracture in time. I kept staring at it, tracing my younger face in the image, searching for something, anything, that could explain what I was seeing. But the more I looked, the more wrong it felt. Not just because I was in it, but because I was smiling. That wasn't a memory I had. I didn't remember ever smiling here. Not once. The back of the photo was blank. No names, no dates. Just the faded scratch of a fingernail drag across the paper. But I remembered the boy next to me, my father as a child. And that sent a new chill through me. He hadn't just returned to Dagger Point in his old age. He had started here. Raised in this house. Raised by something. I returned to his journal, searching for any mention of the photo. I flipped through pages filled with his tight, anxious handwriting. Notes on sleep patterns, voices, hallucinations. Diagrams of memory loops. And then I found a passage circled in red ink. They remember you even when you forget yourself. That's how they find you. That's how they wait. They know your name before you do. That line stopped me cold. Because it wasn't just a metaphor. Something had whispered my name. Not just in the cellar, but in dreams, in walls, even in the static of the broken radio. And I hadn't told anyone my name since I'd arrived. No one. So how did they know it? I paced the room trying to think clearly. But every step felt disjointed. Like my thoughts were skipping tracks. I kept seeing the photo in my head. The child me holding my father's hand. What did it mean? I remembered something from a psychology class I'd taken in college. False memory implantation. People could be led to believe events had happened that never did. Entire fabricated timelines constructed through suggestion. Trauma only amplified that. Was that what this was? A hallucination born of grief and stress? Or had I really been here before? I pulled down an old atlas from my father's bookshelf and opened it to a hand-marked map of Dagger Point. Scribbled notes ran along the coast and forest lines. There were markings, voids, he called them. Places where memory failed. At the center of the page was the house. And beside it, circled in a frantic, uneven red, the burrow. Root. Something clicked then. I remembered the word again. The burrow. It wasn't just a name the locals whispered. It was something else. A place. A being. A wound in the world. That night I dreamt again. I was standing in the cellar, barefoot, the cold stone biting into my feet. The door was open now. Beyond it stretched a narrow hallway carved from black rock, pulsing faintly like the inside of something alive. I moved forward, unable to stop myself. The hallway whispered. But not in words. It whispered names. Hundreds of them. Spoken without sound. Etched in breath against the walls of my mind. Names I didn't know I remembered. Names that knew me. And one stood out from the rest. Elena Voss. I woke up choking, tears streaming down my face, the scream still in my throat. And carved into the wooden floor beside my bed, with fresh splinters curling from the grain, were the words. You remember now. Kennel the Hollow Ones. Chapter 5. The Static Room. On the 6th day the town began to fade. I don't mean metaphorically. I mean it literally began to vanish. As I drove through Dagger Point trying to clear my head, I noticed the houses that had once lined the main street were no longer there. Just gaps. Empty lots where entire buildings used to stand. Gracie's Diner? Gone. Only a cracked foundation remained. The church was still there, but the sign had no letters. Just scorched wood. And the people? Gone too. I stopped at the sheriff's station. Dust drifting in rays of afternoon light. Chairs overturned. Papers scattered like they'd been caught in a sudden storm. I stood in the center of the room, heart pounding. There was a mirror on the wall across from me. And once again I wasn't alone in the reflection. This time there were dozens. Dozens of people standing behind me. Silent. Eyes black. Mouths sewn shut. They weren't there when I turned around. Only in the mirror. And every one of them looked like someone I knew. I stumbled back to the house in a daze, barely able to feel my hands on the steering wheel. The road seemed longer. The turns unfamiliar. I kept checking my reflection in the rearview mirror. Not because I wanted to, but because something behind me kept drawing my gaze. By the time I reached the house it was dusk. Inside the temperature had dropped. My breath fogged in the air. The study door was open. And something had changed. The bookshelf had been moved, revealing a door I had never seen before. Small. Plain. With a brass handle worn smooth. It hadn't been there yesterday. I was sure of it. A note was taped to the door. For those who remember too much. I opened it. Inside was a narrow room, lined floor to ceiling with televisions. Old boxy things. Dozens of them. None were plugged in. And yet each one buzzed with static. White noise filled the room like a scream on mute. And on each screen I saw myself. Not a reflection, recordings. Different versions of me. In different clothes. Different rooms. Some terrified. Some smiling. Some bleeding. All of them mouthing the same word. Run. The air turned colder. Behind me the door creaked closed on its own. And in the static I heard the voice again. Not whispering this time. Louder. Angrier. You shouldn't have come back. You opened it. Now we're in you. Then the static stopped. All at once. Every screen blinked off. And in the silence that followed, something scraped across the floor behind me. I turned. There was nothing. Just the flicker of one final screen that hadn't turned off. It showed the cellar. Life. And the door at the end of it was opening.